What if you could witness the last moments of one of history's most notorious dictators? Saddam Hussein's execution was meant to bring justice, but instead, it sparked outrage and deepened sectarian divides. Why? From the leaked mobile phone footage to the taunts of witnesses, we'll expose the brutal reality of Saddam's final moments. This isn't just about one man's death. It's a window into the chaos of post-invasion Iraq and the complexities of international justice. From palace to spider hole, the fall of a tyrant. For decades, Saddam Hussein ruled Iraq with an iron fist, his name synonymous with terror and brutality. From opulent palaces adorned with gold fixtures to a personal zoo stocked with exotic animals, Saddam's lifestyle was a stark contrast to the suffering of his people. But as the old saying goes, the higher they climb, the harder they fall. And Saddam's fall would be spectacular. The US invasion of Iraq in 2003 marked the beginning of the end for Saddam's regime. As coalition forces stormed Baghdad, the once fearsome dictator vanished into thin air. The world held its breath, wondering where this modern-day Nero had fled. Had he escaped to a friendly nation? Was he hiding in plain sight? Or had he met a grisly end at the hands of his own people? Operation Red Dawn, the mission to capture Saddam, was a 9-month odyssey that would test the limits of American intelligence and military might. The strategy was ingenious in its simplicity. Target the lowest rungs of Saddam's regime. Cooks, bodyguards, and drivers became the focus of intense interrogation. Each tidbit of information, no matter how small, could be the key to unlocking Saddam's whereabouts. The breakthrough came from an unprecedented source, one of Saddam's former drivers. In a moment of weakness or perhaps conscience, he revealed the name of Saddam's right-hand man, Muhammad Ibrahim Umar al-Muslat. This single piece of intelligence set in motion a chain of events that would lead to one of the most significant captures in modern military history. As December 13, 2003 dawned, the air was thick with anticipation. A farm near Tikrit, Saddam's hometown, had become the focal point of American efforts. 600 soldiers from elite special operations units and the U.S. Army's 4th Infantry Division converged on the location. The tension was palpable as they prepared to confront the man who had eluded them for so long. What they found was far from the grandiose spectacle many had expected. Instead of a heavily fortified compound, they discovered a humble spider hole, its entrance concealed by a rug and a thin layer of dirt. It was a far cry from the marble halls and golden toilets of Saddam's former life. As the soldiers lifted the trapdoor, they came face to face with a ghost from the past. The man who emerged from the hole bore little resemblance to the proud dictator who had once strutted across television screens worldwide. His hair was overgrown, his beard unkempt, and his eyes held a mixture of defiance and defeat. This was Saddam Hussein, the butcher of Baghdad, reduced to hiding in a hole in the ground. Despite being armed with a pistol and an AK-47, Saddam offered no resistance. Perhaps he knew the game was up, or maybe the fight had simply gone out of him. As he was pulled from his squalid hideout, the world caught its first glimpse of a fallen tyrant. The image was powerful. A man who had once held the power of life and death over millions, now at the mercy of those he had oppressed. But it was what they found with Saddam that truly highlighted the absurdity of his situation. Clutched in his hands was $750,000 in cash, all in crisp $100 bills. It was a surreal detail that spoke volumes about Saddam's state of mind. Even in his darkest hour, he clung to the trappings of wealth that had defined his reign. The moment of capture was not without its share of raw emotion. An Iraqi-American interpreter, identified only as Samir, reportedly struck Saddam and cursed him for the suffering he had inflicted on countless families. It was a visceral reaction, a moment of catharsis for a nation that had endured decades of oppression. The tyrant on trial, justice or vengeance. The capture of Saddam Hussein marked the end of his reign, But it was just the beginning of a complex legal drama that would captivate the world. As the dust settled from Operation Red Dawn, a new question arose. How does one put a dictator on trial? The answer, it turned out, was far from simple. In the aftermath of Saddam's capture, the Iraqi Special Tribunal was established to pass judgment on key members of his regime for crimes committed against the Iraqi people. The focus of the trial was the Dujali massacre, a horrific event that epitomized the brutality of Saddam's rule. But from the outset, the tribunal faced significant challenges to its legitimacy and fairness. Saddam himself set the tone for the proceedings, denouncing the tribunal as nothing more than a political tool for US President George W. Bush's re-election efforts. His defiant behavior and outbursts in the courtroom became a hallmark of the trial, turning what was meant to be a sober pursuit of justice into a spectacle that often bordered on the farcical. The courtroom drama, however, was overshadowed by a far more sinister reality outside its walls. Saddam's defense lawyers faced extreme risks, with many paying the ultimate price for their involvement in the trial. The assassinations of these legal professionals raised serious concerns about the safety and fairness of the trial process. How could justice be served when those tasked with defending the accused were being systematically eliminated? As the trial progressed, international scrutiny intensified. Human rights organizations like Human Rights Watch didn't mince words, labeling it a flawed trial that marked a significant step away from the rule of law in Iraq. The criticism wasn't limited to the trial itself. Amnesty International went so far as to condemn the eventual execution, stating it was especially egregious when imposed after an unfair trial. These statements highlighted the broader implications for human rights and the rule of law in post-Saddam Iraq. Legal experts found themselves divided on the trial's fairness. While some argued it was nothing more than a sham, others like Miranda Sissons, maintained that it was not a sham trial and that the judges did their best under incredibly difficult circumstances. This divide among experts only served to underscore the complexity of the situation and the challenges of administering justice in the wake of a fallen dictatorship. As the world watched and debated, the trial moved inexorably toward its conclusion. On November 5, 2006, the final verdict was delivered. Saddam Hussein was sentenced to death by hanging. The decision was expedited amid political pressures, raising questions about whether justice was being served or if vengeance was the true motivator. The rush to execution only fueled further controversy. Even US President George W. Bush, whose administration had played a key role in Saddam's downfall, expressed disappointment over the execution's handling. Bush stated that it looked like it was kind of a revenge killing, a comment that reinforced doubts about the legitimacy of the Iraqi government and the entire legal process. The gallows await, Saddam's final hours. As the world held its breath, Saddam Hussein spent his final hours in a stark contrast to the opulence that once defined his reign. The man who had ruled Iraq with an iron fist for decades now found himself confined to a small cell at Camp Justice, awaiting his fate. The transfer to Iraqi custody marked the beginning of the end, a symbolic handover that would culminate in one of the most controversial executions in modern history. In the shadow of the gallows, Saddam's thoughts turned to his legacy. Just 2 days before his execution, he penned a letter that would be released on the Arab Socialist Ba'ath Party website. In this final message to the Iraqi people, Saddam urged unity and forgiveness. He called on his countrymen not to harbor hatred towards the invading nations, but rather to focus their ire on the decision-makers behind the invasion. It was a surprising plea from a man known for his ruthlessness, perhaps an attempt to reshape his image in the annals of history. As the clock ticked down, Saddam prepared for his final meal. The once powerful dictator, who had dined on the finest cuisines in his palatial residences, now sat before a simple plate of chicken and rice. Accompanying his modest fare was a cup of hot water with honey, a small comfort in the face of impending death. This Last Supper, so ordinary in its composition, stood as a stark reminder of how far Saddam had fallen from his days of unchecked power. Outside the prison walls, tension mounted as witnesses gathered for the execution. The group was a mix of officials and relatives of Saddam's victims, creating an atmosphere charged with conflicting emotions. Some sought closure for years of suffering, while others viewed the proceedings with a sense of grim duty. The world watched and waited, knowing that this moment would etch itself into the pages of history. As Saddam was led to the gallows, his demeanor surprised many. Rather than showing fear or remorse, he remained defiant to the last. Witnesses reported that he shouted, "Allahu Akbar," and proclaimed that the Muslim Ummah would be victorious. In a final act of resistance, he encouraged Iraqis to continue fighting against the American invaders. It was as if, even in his last moments, Saddam was still playing the role of the unyielding leader. The walk to the gallows quickly descended into chaos. Supporters of the Shiite cleric Muqtada al-Sadr were among those present, and they began to taunt Saddam with chants of "Muqtada, Muqtada, Muqtada." The execution chamber, meant to be a solemn place of justice, instead became an arena of settling old scores. Saddam, ever the showman, responded to the jeers with laughter and retorts. When a guard accused him of causing suffering, Saddam shot back, "I have saved you from destitution and misery and destroyed your enemies, the Persians and Americans." As the noose was placed around his neck, Saddam began to recite the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. It was in this moment, as the words of his final prayer left his lips, that the trap door beneath him opened. The sudden drop and the audible crack that followed signaled the end of Saddam Hussein's life. The man who had once held absolute power over millions now dangled lifeless, his neck broken by the fall. What should have been a somber moment of justice was instead captured on a mobile phone by one of the witnesses. This grainy footage, showing the taunts, chaos, and Saddam's final defiant moments, would soon spark international controversy. The video laid bare the raw emotions and lack of decorum that surrounded the execution, challenging the notion that this was a dignified act of justice rather than an act of vengeance. Saddam Hussein's execution marked a pivotal moment in Iraqi's tumultuous history, yet its impact remains a subject of heated debate. Recent studies reveal a deeply divided Iraqi public opinion regarding Saddam's legacy. While many view him as a brutal tyrant, responsible for immense suffering, others, particularly among Sunni populations, see him as a martyr and a symbol of resistance against foreign intervention. The manner of Saddam's trial and execution has cast a long shadow over international approaches to trying former dictators. Some experts argue that it set a precedent for how such trials should be conducted, while others caution that it exemplified the dangers of politicizing justice. This dichotomy raises profound questions about the nature of justice in a world still grappling with the aftermath of autocratic regimes. As history continues to unfold, the execution of Saddam Hussein stands as a stark reminder of the complexities inherent in transitional justice. Will future generations view this event as justice served, or as a missed opportunity for reconciliation and healing? The answer may lie in Iraq's ongoing struggle for stability and the lessons drawn from this contentious chapter in its history.